who they were. I knew there was some sort of powerful group of men and women who met every year. Everywhere you looked within the grounds, there were either uniformed officers or other officers in combat-type uniforms guarding the entire grounds. The place was literally sealed off. I personally was left with a very strong impression that I didn't feel this was an entirely healthy thing.
Why are the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, and similar groups, why are they so secretive? I have pondered and pondered and pondered on that question, trying to think of alternatives to the conspiracy theorists' usual explanation. They're plotting nothing but unmitigated evil against the rest of us. And I think part of the answer is they are plotting unmitigated evil against the rest of us, and part of the answer is they're plotting things they don't want anybody else to know about for the same reason that all of us have things we'd rather keep private. No business allows people to come in off the street and examine their books and what research they're doing and so on. And there's a certain amount of secrecy that's just innate in the fact of organization. You don't want people outside the organization to know too much about what the organization is doing, even if it's harmless.
Conspiracy theories would seem to be about secret societies covertly running the world. But in addition to this, conspirologists also develop theories about overt organizations like the United Nations and NATO.
It's a very common belief on the part of right-wing organizations, especially in this country, that the United Nations is some kind of military political organization whose purpose is to take over and to basically stage a military invasion of the U.S. and use that as a springboard to establish this one world government, and that NATO is the force by which they're going to do this.
The New World Order is housed right here at the United Nations. It is global government. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One world, one race, one ruler. It's what Rudolf Hess talked about when he introduced Adolf Hitler. This is Hitler's dream come true. This is a nightmare. This is the tombstone upon all sovereignty for all nations for all time. The United Nations must fall for freedom to live.
Where institutions of freedom have lain dormant, the United Nations can offer them new life. These institutions play a crucial role in our quest for a new world order, an order in which no nation must surrender one iota of its own sovereignty, an order characterized by the rule of law rather than the resort to force.
World War I, World War II were both created to bring about the United Nations. They're in the war business. Wars, like bridges, are engineered. This New World Order is in the war business. And to create the war, they can then say that they want peace. They couldn't, this would never have been built without the aid of World War I, without the aid of World War II.
There's creating events in the world like wars and terrorist situations, runs on currencies, stock market collapses, which create situations of problems which the public then demand that they provide answers and solutions to the problems, and then those who've covertly created the problems and got that public reaction do something, then offer the solution to the problem.
The United Nations may be the red herring. It was kind of like, this was the shell that long has been pointed to. Look at this. These are the dangerous threat. And, you know, I think fortunately the United Nations has proven to be more incompetent than evil. But, you know, all the focus up until recently has been on the United Nations, and quietly groups like the World Trade Organization were basically taking over control of international business agreements. Organizations like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have basically been taking control of financing in the world and making dictates of how countries are to develop, all into the interest of international corporate structures. And you realize, well, maybe all this focus on the United Nations was because this is the one that was never going to really amount to anything. I believe it was one of the Rothschilds said something to the effect once, give me control of a nation's currency and I don't care who makes the laws. Because when you control the money supply, once you control the currency, you do have the ability to decide how the government behaves, because they do have to react to monetary pressures. I mean, money talks.
When the IMF loans monies to countries, they say, well, what is your collateral? They said, well, we've got the rainforest. So, well, just turn over the rainforest to us. We've got minerals. Well, just turn over the minerals to us. And they cut down a tree and give them money. And those people are impoverished, paying the interest on the tax. And if they can't pay it, then the United States taxpayers are saying, well, we've got to come up with just a little bit more money. For what? For the globalists? For the Hitlers? For the elite? For the Illuminati? That's insanity.
So is this the ultimate Illuminati agenda? Are they controlling the global economy to control the world?
Hundreds of anti-capitalist protesters are in Washington to try to disrupt meetings of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund.
At every street corner around the IMF and the World Bank, the demonstrators have set up human chains to stop the meetings taking place. The demonstrators say the IMF and the World Bank are contributing to global poverty. But at the top of today's agenda on the two global organizations is how to reduce the debt of the world's poorest nations.
The demonstrations against the IMF and all this were a reaction to this centralization of power and sort of a rebellion against the idea that economic policy, global economic policy, can be shaped by a small group of people who have vested interests in shaping it. And in a way, that's sort of the definition of a conspiracy.
When you don't have your freedom, you don't have your family, you don't have your nation, you don't have your right, then you are living as a slave.
We're now in a situation where the hidden is becoming visible. We now have a window of time to throw a spanner in the works. And that means humanity's got to open its mind to a much greater possibility of what's going on than it has had the ability or the desire to do so far. Because if we don't throw a spanner in the works, and we can, then the New World Order will become physical reality.
I absolutely believe we're moving to a new world order, not necessarily the one that anybody has planned. We seem to have arrived at the stage, thanks to the computer and internet revolutions, where information available to human beings is doubling approximately once a year, which means we're having more and more dramatic, unexpected, totally unpredictable social changes of all sorts.
There has always been a authoritarian structure which has, to some degree, controlled people. And you could argue that in the past 50 years it has become more powerful, albeit also more subtle on how they've done it. But it's always existed. And to say that there isn't some sort of secret society mystical element to it would really ignore the reality of the situation.
There's certainly a huge human toll that's extracted by the misuse of paranoid thinking. You know, I mean, in a way, I sort of draw a distinction between paranoid thinking and conspiracy research, because, you know, there are real conspiracies that happen.